Thank you, Christina, for joining the spirit of the event. Hey, everyone, my name is Josh Rothus. I'm the publisher of Sublunary Editions. We are here today to welcome name of author for this event celebrating the release of Title. This is our first, potentially last anonymous publication. This should be the final nail in the coffin of the theory that it is in fact a typo on our release graphics. It is a real book. It's a real book, and there's a real person behind it who you will hear from momentarily. So name of author was born sometime, I assume, in the 20th century. It's somewhere in the US, perhaps a military outpost. I don't know. They went to school, I think. Perhaps a notable MFA program. I don't know. He's written a number of other books, apparently, some of which were read by some people. That's about all I know. I hope to find out a little bit more during the course of the event today. I know several of you have a lot staked on the identity of this person. I'm curious what comes out of it, but don't spoil the fun too much. So without further ado, Name, why don't you read us in with the first few chapters of Title? Name, you are muted, which is somehow appropriate for you.
Okay, so I'm gonna read the first 3 chapters, which amounts to about 2 pages. Okay. So it starts with an epigraph, resonant excerpt from Jacobean drama by questionable attribution. I know there are people in this room who don't like the Shakespeare controversy stuff, so I don't want to start that. But I'll just move in to chapter 1. It would open with a formulated flourish, ideas rather than things, which is not to suggest an absence of the conventional flora and fauna, fabricated objects, location with human figures in it, etc., but merely to admit the immaterial evidence of any such mise-en-scène. So I actually need to go dark here because I forgot. I don't have my glasses. I can barely read that. That was from memory. So give me a second. Okay. Presuming this caveat's taken as read, the flourish would leave it foregone and proceed with unremarked artifice to its point of departure. At this particular point, for narrative's sake, we'll posit particularity, the volume would open into a well-lighted room. There, here, you'd comprise the only organic matter, the ersatz human figure, drawn in by the aforementioned flourish, and then fictional character would make an appearance. Or rather, you would. He'd presumably have been where he is. An arrival met with no niceties. You're not greeted, asked in, etc. There'll be no interlocution nor human contact, but you've made such visitations before and are familiar with the protocol. Fictional character would take you for a fly on the 4th wall and go about his business. Who is this fictional character? You'll wonder as a matter of course and make the preliminary deduction that since he is solitary, he must be protagonist by default. And pronominal evidence suggests male. Over the course of the narrative, you may begin to question the efficacy of deduction, but for now you're decided. Protagonist, male. And what race is he? What faith? What socioeconomic class? You'll need to know because you're intrusive and exacting in this role. Here, there, minding your own business would be counterintuitive. And what's he look like? You want his hair, eyes, and skin colored in, informing a visage of tone and contour. You'll want his build built. We'll want his body. You want a full measure of flesh and won't be satisfied until you get it. You want the time of day, month, year, past, present, future. You'll want his whereabouts divulged and by association, yours. All in due time. One can only imagine. For now, you're compelled to situate protagonist in the Anglophone world. You don't know where you are in this world, could be literally anywhere, or more precariously, elsewhere. Protagonist's failsafe being that he won't, strictly speaking, be where he is, whereas you'll have no such exemption. Chapter 2 would open with another formulated flourish. Be forewarned, the text will be riddled with writing. You'll grow so wary and or weary of words that by the uppermost arc of the narrative, you'll be craving action and want to just get on with your life. This prospect may prove daunting, however, and so there's a good chance you'll opt to read on and on. As you read the first sentence of the second paragraph of chapter 2, you notice that protagonist has not as yet moved a muscle, nor, to be sure, evinced aught of his appearance. He is merely there, here, in this, that well-lighted place. Then you note the quote-unquote facial tic, introducing the still featureless face, the brow beginning to furrow, the almost perceptible sound of grinding teeth. You're beginning to make out protagonist's form when he suddenly thrusts himself out of his chair like a undetonated firework / arthritic jack-in-the-box / flightless bird having a last go at gravity. On his feet, he begins to pace with a captive animal's gait, reminiscent of Rilke's panther / Macnice's wolf / Nabokov's ape, is always already restless when you happen upon it. You do not see protagonist pacing, or if you do, it's a protagonist of your own making in the mind's eye. Perhaps you've featured him provisionally, colored in and contoured his superficies, perhaps even performed a pronominal gender reassignment, or what you will. And yet such initiative would be out of character. More likely you're awaiting a tug at the leash of our story's seeing eye dog, and the only protagonist you see pacing is protagonist paces. In this same regard, you'll read his thoughts as they proceed to stream across the page. You have telepathic powers from this point of view, but are otherwise impotent. You can know everything, but do nothing about it. Chapter 3. More writing. Re the passage of time, human nature, etc., etc. Fictional characters' plight plotted. Woes chronicled and present perils posed. Distinctive traits emerge. Tonal calibration, mood set, adumbration of major conceit. Foreshadowing? Could be, could very well be.
Thank you, Name. And if anyone else wants to turn on the filter to make Name feel more at home, by all means do so. So we're not going to spend this entirety of this event trying to get at your identity, but I do have to ask you to be truthful in answering the following question, which is, are you any of these? Elena Ferrante, Thomas Pynchon, Andy Kaufman, Christopher Marlowe, Sir Francis Bacon, a member of Daft Punk, Francis Bacon, the 20th century figurativist, Fernando Pessoa, Alvaro de Campos, Ricardo Reis, Alberto Cairo, or Banksy?
Nor am I Edward de Vere. I didn't hear him in there anywhere.
Well, of course,
no, I am none of those. Obviously, I fancy myself. I aspire to being the literary Banksy, but I am not. I'm neither Banksy.
All right. Well, now that that's out of the way, it seems like everyone's left now that the suspense is gone. So why write anonymously? Have you written without giving it away, anything under your given name? And if so, what did anonymity allow you to do?
So it kind of just worked with the project conceptually, that this notion that there is no ipseity, that there is no uniqueness, that there's just a category, you're just a category of thing, you're just a species of thing, that, you know, the cow goes moo, duck goes quack, I'm just a human, like in the wheel there. And really, I think part of it was, like probably most of the people in this room, as a writer, you spend a lot of your life trying to make a name. I think in our group, identity and vanity is secondary, whereas a lot of writers I see it's more primary, but still it's there. It's that ickiness of wanting everyone to see my name and read my name and know, that, and striving for that for so long, it just became, I just kind of got sick of it. I wanted to just get rid of it, right? You know, I mean, don't mistake that this is me being less egoistic than other people. I'm actually way more egoistic, and that's part of it. Just kind of being sick of my own ego, and just I'm really kind of married to nobody finding out that it's me ever. And so I'm torn between wanting to play with it, and really being serious about it's just a book. It's out there. It's a book, and it was kind of like, you know, a love letter to my fellow writers and readers, basically the people in this room. That it's about that communion in the well-lighted room where it's reader, writer in that room.
So I'm curious, when you were writing title, did you have aspirations for it at the time? Did it start as just an exercise, and then what made you send it to Sublunary? And then given this enormous ego of yours, were you ever tempted, once it was going to be published by independent prestige press, were you ever tempted to come forward?
So it's actually, I've written 12 books. This was actually my 9th book. I actually wrote this about 12 years ago, and then revisited over the last year. It's you know, I really kind of brought it to what it is now over the last year. But part of the reason I went back to it was because of Sublunary, because I came under the influence of what you're doing there, and kind of so as authors, you know, you start out as an author, you think, oh, I'm just gonna get really good, and I'm just gonna write something really great and blow everyone's mind, and then it's just somebody's gonna publish it, right? When in reality, you find your author the way you find the person you fall in love with, right? That the publisher is, you find somebody who gets you. And it just kind of landed there, and it just realized that this book, and it was also, of my 12 books, I really feel like the other 11 books just aren't worth publishing. 2 of them were published, but I don't think they work. I think I was trying to do something too ambitious with all of them. I was trying to write Ulysses every time out, and I'm not capable of that. And there's something really kind of simple about this, and that it fit. It wasn't ambitious in that kind of icky way that a lot of what I've written is ambitious. And as far as identity, no, I'm really married to deflecting suspicion about who I might be.
Do you in some way feel you had to write the other books to write this one?
Yeah, I mean, I had to write and read all those other books to write this one, right? So it was a kind of, it's a kind of exhaustion. And that's part of what it's about. It's about exhaustion, literary aesthetic. You know, it's all been done. The kind of exhaustion of the life of the writer reader. And yeah, so they all kind of, I wouldn't say led up to, because I've written a couple since this, but they're all absorbed into this for sure.
What you mentioned there, it kind of strikes me about the book is that it is a bit of a love letter to the author-reader relationship, but it also speaks to a kind of exhaustion around the expectations of writerly life, which you've touched on a bit earlier. Expectations that tend to go unfulfilled, you know, the romance of the solitary author pecking away in your what looks like children's room.
No, that's my bunk bed. I sleep in.
Oh, okay. Okay. That makes sense. All the sense. So you have, yes, this writer pecking away. You have this idealized reader who's out there who is going to complete you by taking in and subsuming your work, and all held together by this grand purpose to writing and reading and the artifice of the work of fiction, which you've tended to lay bare here. Am I right in sensing, I think, some frustration with that paradigm, and maybe your own expectations when you were a wee name just starting out?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about that frustration, that struggle, and the absurdity of what we do. So part of it is this overleaping when you go into a book, say you read Crime and Punishment, say, feels like you're doing something really adult, and really kind of deep, and really you're sitting in a room pretending. You're an adult who's sitting in a room pretending, conspiring to pretend with an author who did the same thing. And there's something absurd and kind of, I don't want to say useless, but kind of just really pathetic about it. But I think I landed on the fact that, yeah, that's almost unavoidable to me, that fiction is childish, that literature is kind of childish. And yet, and there really is no connection, that I and thou thing, that there's that great gap fixed between author and reader. And yet I've always had this feeling of communion with the author in every book that I read, this kind of deep feeling that I'm in that place with them. And so it kind of, this silly thing that we do, that we've made, most of the people in this room have made a religion out of, essentially, transcends that even so, right? With all the frustration, with all the kind of ridiculous shit that we do, just making shit up and pretending that it's not in spite of that, maybe because of that, it has this kind of grandeur. But yeah, there's still frustration there. So there's the constant repetition of the do, that you're not really doing anything, and there's this desire as an existent person to do something, what to do, and we don't know what to do. And there's still that desire, there's still that kind of dissatisfaction with the life in books as well.
There is inevitably a trap that one gets into with, like, if I just read enough, then I will be able to do ... whether that is to write my own book or to go out in the world being assured of my place in it and the meaning of my my being in it. And that is a Sisyphean task, very much in the sense Camus meant it. So based on that, like, another thing, I think I've brought it up in a couple places, that this book really puts in mind the late David Markson novels, where it is dispensing with plot, but in a playful way, in a way that hasn't quite given up that artifice yet. And I'm curious if the late Markson works had influenced this, and what you were setting out to do that's maybe different than it, but in the spirit of it.
So yeah, David Markson, who my most prized possession is, he sent me 2 postcards, because I sent him a gushing fan letter about 15 years ago. He was dying at the time and I didn't know, and he sent me this postcard with like 5 sentences on it, which was just blew me away, and was so important to me. And he's such a huge, I was really emotional when he died. He's a huge part of my writing and reading life. And I like that you noted that doesn't quite dispense with plot, right? There is this kind of cartoonish little plot going on there, and there's still yeah, and it's that kind of, I share that dissatisfaction with Markson, and yet I think his books, that tone is very similar to what I'm doing in this book, not just in format, but in tone, in being kind of that exhausted sigh of being a writer, reader, but being resigned to it and kind of feeling that love for the book. I think is similar to Markson.
When you were writing this, so this came to us via an open submission period we had in 2019, I think. Was it 2019? No, 2020, summer of 2020. Vic and I were reading through submissions, and we happened upon this one. And as we do in submissions, we'll read the first few pages, and then that's kind of the smell test, and then we'll mark it for the other one to go back and read, because we think, all right, this is good enough for us to spend a little bit more time with, because it's unfeasible to read the entirety of everything that's sent your way. And I think our suspicion was that there is absolutely no way that, it's funny, but there's no way this conceit will hold up in a book length work. And the reason we agreed to publish it was because, by God, it did. It was surprising in that, and I liken it to the late Marxen in that you enter those novels, especially the first time, thinking like, okay, there's a shtick here, but then it pulls you in, and you start to somehow feel there's an arc, there's an emotional arc you're feeling because of this shtick, and it ceases at some point to be a shtick, or at least it lays bare that, as you might have alluded to earlier, all writing is shtick. So when picking this up, I really want to know about the genesis of writing this, when you sat down to write that first page, and I don't know if it's, happened in sequential order. Did you have similar suspicions that, oh, this is just, it's a fun exercise, but it's not going anywhere? Or did you enter this with, I'm going to write this anonymous work? Did you have a firm idea of it in mind, or were you kind of dealing with the same trepidations as we might have had as early readers?
So it goes back to what I said before, that it doesn't completely dispense with stuff, right? That there is an arc, that it cheats. It didn't, that was the original, that it was going to be complete placeholding, that it was going to be this complete excavated kind of exoskeleton of a novel. And I couldn't do that, and it didn't sustain it. And I'm not sure, and I know for you, Josh, that it sustains that. I'm not sure it does sustain it for everybody else. I'm not for every reader, it will sustain it. And what's so funny about that is that it didn't sustain it. If you'll notice in the book, this wasn't a gimmick that I did. You notice that it goes to chapter 21, suddenly it's chapter 25. Though I wasn't like being shticky with lacunae in there. Those are actual chapters that I pulled out. So there are actual lacunae all through there, because it was originally about 150 pages, and it didn't sustain it itself. And so when I went back to it, I just kept chopping away at it. Had a lot of like crazy chapters in it that I hated to get rid of, because it was a really fun book to write. But yeah, I didn't think it did sustain it. And when I set out, yeah, I guess I did set out for something completely conceptual, something completely, but then cheated. It's a cheated. I mean, it doesn't fulfill its conceptual project, and I think that's why it works for me, and I think that's why it's kind of a really simple little book, rather than something so difficult to read. But I don't know. I'm glad you might. I'm not sure everyone else might not get to some like chapter 56 and go, okay, yeah, I get it. I get it. Oh, I almost said
Okay. Yeah, I do maintain that it works, and I'm very, very proud to have published it. The thing, I guess, like the temptation is always like the mock critical voice to say, but doesn't every work fail and cheat past the shortcomings of its conceptual beginnings? But maybe I'll write my own review of it in that sense later. I do love how this ended up being, perhaps, I think, more of a collaboration than you had even intended. Like, for instance, I'll cop to the copyright page being my doing, where it says cover design by outsourced, copy editing by overworked intern, typeset and font that has in all likelihood not been properly licensed, and of course the famous independent prestige press from second tier metropolis. I had a ball doing that, and I
enjoyed the Zoom boom too in the email.
It's fun to get into that mode, really. So do you see this, was this an expunging of something? Was this you getting something out of your system to perhaps make a break and visit other forums, or to say, I know you mentioned writing 2 books after this, but do you see this book as kind of a break, or is it the beginning of something new? Is this not the end of name of author? Could you pop up again, perhaps in another genre, or was this really kind of a catharsis as a writer?
Yeah, so I mean, so every book's a catharsis, right? I mean, I think that's probably why everyone in this room writes. I don't know what like civilians do with anguish, if they just have it. Okay, I have this anguish and I don't do anything, this kind of existential angst. I just have it. You write, right? That's so that's the kind of, thing that goes into every book. Yeah, and it's interesting that I did write two books after it, but when I went back to it, as I went through it and kind of got it to where it is now, I did have this feeling of like, maybe I'm done. Maybe I'll listen to, because the book is telling me, this is, what are you doing? But at the same time, there's a line in the book where it says, but his recidivism is inevitable, essential, in progress. I'm sure, because I don't know what else to do but write and read. So I've been writing, yeah, and I know we've talked about this. I do write in another genre. I'm trying to do something different, emphasis on do, without giving too much away. But
I assume it involves the ukulele behind you, which makes me think you also might be Malcolm Lowry.
oh no, that's another clue. You're giving. Don't point out the clues, Josh.
My apologies, name.
Yeah, I don't. I don't know. But yeah, there was a kind of life in books punctuation that this book kind of made for me. That kind of made me make peace with this wasted life.
There's something to it. A thing I've often come back to when people ask the inevitable question of what ties sublunary titles together, why this group of books that you've chosen to focus on, and when I have to give an answer that's anything other than just because those are the ones I like, or the ones that Vic or Jessica or Jacob are excited about doing, the thing I come back to is the generative quality of them. I like books that make me want to go write other books, and that's it. Like when I read this book, when I read Corpses, when I read A Luminous History of the Palms, Studies of Silhouettes, like all of these things brought in some way something to me as a writer, because I'm selfish in that regard, and that's part of being a writer, and I will never lose that side of it. But there's something interesting in reading it, in laying these things bare in some ways. It's a challenge, I think, as a writer, whether you're trying to approach the conceptual art experimental novel or trying to approach something that's more plot driven or something that sort of cheats in one direction or another, laying these things bare, and seeing them in this form where they are obvious and formula, like it's like seeing the formulas on a paper. Something might be formulaic, but until you see it written down, it's like, oh yeah, that's what I was doing. Is there something in that, like when writing it, or the intention for the reader to sort of see these things and also be like, yeah, okay, like I see what you're doing, maybe try to go somewhere else, because I think that's the danger sometimes of conceptual or experimental, whatever that means, writing.
Yeah.
Is
So yeah, I'm definitely into. So ironically, and I haven't mentioned this though, the book itself, the gesture, that bracketing gesture, is borrowed, is from a book that I read a really long time ago by Talia Field. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with Talia Field, called Point and Line. And she was doing something with language that just kind of blew my mind, that you could make the language, you could make the narrative and the prose, make it engendered in the reader, that the reader would have to bring their own, which they do. I mean, this is kind of silly because you do that anyway, right? Every reader, Crime and Punishment is a different book to every reader. But the notion of the bracketed material, that you would trigger something rather than signify something, that you would have to. And I didn't really fulfill that. Like, there's so many specifics in it too, that it also had to be this kind of celebration of literature and books. But yeah, and the fundamental to the book, I think, is that fear that you're just doing something, and or even are someone who is just a category of thing, who's just doing that, it's all been done, and that you're just rehashing, you're just, you know, repeating. um so yeah, I have that anxiety and that kind of thrill of kind of seeing, so that you have that moment with it, with an author like David Markson, like I could have written that book, like this feels so, you know, like, oh my God, but then, you know, I wanted to write that, or that's already there, you know, the things that we write, the things that we create are already there anyway, in some platonic form.
Yeah, there is. I'll quote John Treffry, since he's not here to defend himself, when he was having our famous debate whether short stories were a good form or not, where he talks about like hating to feel when he's reading something like it's a contraption. And I think we hate as writers to also, you know, you're considering this as some sort of pure artistic expression of your inner being, but at the same time, one has to be focused on things like pacing, on how the reader is going to encounter this, on how you want to make them feel, so then you can jerk them in the other direction and make them feel something else, maybe a little more strongly a few pages later. And I think that's something that this book does well, is both lay bare but also celebrate the fact that, yeah, these are like, we're building, you know, building the better mousetrap um as part of what we do. Like it's not just art, it is and I hate this word, but I'm going to say it is craft as well. uh and I think the reason I hate saying that is what this book you know, illustrates. I think that's why I think it's good for us to feel uncomfortable with that, but then have to maybe come to terms with it.
Yeah, I mean, you've really hit it there with craft. I think I used the term craft earlier in this broadcast, and I am virulently averse to that term. And my favorite quote is Galway Kinnell. They asked him about craft, and Galway Kinnell said, "Matters of craft are matters in which I know nothing." And of course, he doesn't really mean that, but yeah. So that's at the heart of it too. Is, does it just come down? So that's why I hate that people talking about craft. Maybe it is just craft, that it's all craft. But if that's all it is craft, that you're putting this place, oh, you did that well, then it's just craft. I feel like there's something so reductive about the notion of craft, and yet, yeah, I'm very anti-craft. I'm absolutely cool with people doing MFA programs. I'm betraying that was not, that's not really an option on the back of the book. But I have an aversion to craft talk, and yet, yeah, I agree that craft is a thing, right? It is a thing.
Yeah, and this book in many ways points it out. Yeah, it points out when certain beats happen in a book, in what you're doing to the reader, like what you want them to be feeling or questioning it at a given point. And it's a tough pill to swallow, to think of it in that ways. And I share your aversion, but then again, I said it. I want to ask, and this will be the last question. We'll let you read a little bit more after this, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. Do you have any sort of anonymous heroes in literary history that you look up to?
Anonymous they have to be anonymous?
Anonymous, pseudonymous, heteronymous,
Well,
Hieronymus
I
Bosch.
mean, definitely. I mean, you name them all, right? You let in with them. Pessoa for sure. No, I'm really, two of my biggest influences are Banksy is actually a really, I know Banksy, I think that there's an exhaustion of Banksy, like people don't like Banksy anymore. I think Banksy is so great. I think I'm heavily influenced by Andy Kaufman. Has been a huge, and for that, go all the way back to our mutt. Our mutt is a very Duchamp is a huge influence. I'm influenced by people who take the piss out of stuff, who can fully kind of remove and expose Beckett, obviously remove and expose the pure vanity of name, that we name each other. We have given names to tell each other apart. That in and itself might be too much of a leap. We're just people. Not, oh, I almost said my name again. No, and we're Joshua, yeah.
I did want to point out that this, just as a little Easter egg, that based on names, obvious indebtedness to Beckett. This is Beckett's handwriting that I used to base that on the cover. And yeah,
I also have to say, what's kind of amazing about having found Sublunary is I would normally be like freaking out about book cover, because the whole thing, I think of a book as a total object. And I would normally be really kind of freaking, as I was with my first publisher, about what the cover looks like, what the press is and all that stuff. And I had so much confidence in Josh, is that I didn't even really kind of say anything. Cool, whatever you want to do. And he just did exactly what I would have done. I hope for every author that they find their publisher that just kind of gets it and you roll with that. I feel so lucky.
Shucks. And thank you. It has been a pleasure. I will let you get to reading. Why don't we read some selections from a little bit later in the text, and then audience, feel free. You can either I think you have to ask to unmute yourselves, or unmute yourselves and ask questions later, or throw them in the chat and I will read them for Name. But Name, take it away.
I'm gonna get my glasses back on here. Okay. Let me find the text. Sorry, I'm doing the online. Can you tell me what chapter it is, Josh? Is it 30? I think it's 30. Nope, it's not 30. Oh, now I can't find it. Oh, that's not good. Is it earlier? Sorry. Oh, okay, here it is. So I'm just gonna do 17 and 18. Okay, so I guess I kind of have to set this up. So there's a protagonist and he's in this room. And we've learned a little bit about him, but not much. It's pretty empty at this point, but we've established conflict, that there is conflict, not what it is. Okay, chapter 17. Agon established, the narrative begins its initial thrust, after the fact. It is another flashback, but so distinctively incarnated, you mistake it for the present at present. Truth be told, the well-lighted room is fixed and ever-present, so this is an honest mistake. Herein, one can only pretend to move back and forth in time and space. An anachronistic Victorian epistle arrives for protagonist, and the two of you read it silently, though you can almost hear protagonist mumbling the words under his breath like a child who needs to sound everything out. You expect it to introduce an antagonist or love interest, shed light on the past and present, or at the very least set a course of events in motion. Perhaps it does, but you can't tell how. Protagonist writes out an equally esoteric reply and deposits it in the postbox at the corner of those two busy thoroughfares of his resident anywhere. A few days later, another letter arrives, and the next day, several more letters. By the end of autumn, it's always already the fall where he is, protagonist is receiving whole sacks of mail. He could never have dreamed he had so many correspondents. He'd been theretofore unaware he had any. This epistolary episode lasts for well over 10,000 pages, spanning more than 2 decades duration in the narrative, and bringing protagonist to the moment you'd met him in that well-lighted place. Each day, protagonist kneels over his prie-dieu, reading and feverishly scribbling away, but is unable to stay the course of this paper trail. After what seems like a lifetime, or a more daunting prospect has been, protagonist concedes the comprehensive futility of this preoccupation and vows to get on with it being life, presumably, though his recidivism is inevitable, essential, in progress. He goes to the post office and puts a hold on his mail, returns to the formerly well-lit room and sits quietly in the dark like a Carthusian monk / root vegetable / museum piece after hours. And then this is the last chapter I'll read. Chapter 18. There is great significance in the aforementioned missives, which protagonist now proceeds to dispose of into the voluminous recycling bin beside the gargantuan dumpster out back. The narrative cipher key is, in fact, embedded in this colossal haystack of letters. You could pinpoint the crux of the curse therein. But you weren't about to plow through 1,000,000+ pages of what seemed to you to be the maniacal ravings of Freemasons, dirty laundry lists, and litigious letters to Santa. You don't have that much spare time to give, and you'd have had to give years, if not the rest of your life in the endeavor, to not just read, but comprehend. You're beginning to get the feeling that this is precisely what the narrative requires of you, the rest of your life.
Name, thank you again for that. I'll open it up if anyone has questions, comments, concerns. Again, I think you can either unmute or just throw them in the chat, and I will read them. So someone's got something now.
Hi.
Ilya, hi.
Name, which Beckett's work is your preferred one, and why?
So absolutely love the plays. It would be really close. I was immediately when you asked that, I really immediately went to The Unnamable, to the Malloy trilogy. I toyed with maybe, I'm going to read something to finish, to close, and I was going to do the last page of The Unnamable. It's hard not to say that, but I think probably Krapp's Last Tape. Krapp's Last Tape, I feel like, is the most overwhelming piece of literature I've ever encountered. That kind of examination and kind of resolution and feeling of time, the way time just crushes you, the way you can't do the things, everything you wanted to do was right there and you could not do it. That feeling that's expressed in Krapp's Last Tape is just, that play just blows me away. I mean, I could go on. The play, Ohio Impromptu, which I think is a dry run for Krapp's Last Tape. I think that Knocking in Ohio Impromptu is the rewinding in Krapp's Last Tape. It's a very similar play. And obviously the Malloy trilogy is just, I think, the most devastating book ever written. Yeah, Beckett's a huge thing for me.
We can tell. I'm a Murphy man personally, but
Murphy. Was it Murphy that the ashes went into the toilet? Was that Murphy? Was that no,
but it is where I nicked the word sublunary from. Fun fact. Alexander writes, so I am, among other things, a scholar of French literature, and you've written a very French book. Flaubert's comments on writing a book about nothing, Beckett's, Blanchot. Can you respond to this accusation?
Well, it's somebody tweeted something about Derrida the other day, and I made a comment that, you know, every American, I have a kind of ridiculous ego stroke when you called it French. As an American authors, you have to understand that how like Deleuze and Derrida and all these people, and to be associated with French and to say that the book is French, which I feel like it's kind of British. I love that you think it's French. I don't take that as an accusation. We have this, I don't know if Josh shares this, but American writers have this inferiority complex to British and French literature. So I'm way too flattered by that. So somebody else, I think mentioned Blanchot. I actually wrote, one of the books I wrote was just very derivative, and was just, I spent about maybe a year and a half of my life, a really dark year and a half of my life, under the influence of Blanchot, kind of down the rabbit hole of Blanchot. Blanchot is another huge influence on me. Yeah, obviously French literature. I'm trying to think who else. Oh God, Mallarmé, for sure. Huge influence. But yeah, the whole continental philosophy in general has had. I don't know if that's readable in the book. I've tried not to make it too. A lot of my other books are so heavily under the influence of Deleuze and Guattari, and I don't want to say Derrida because I couldn't say that I really understand Derrida. But heavily under the influence of French thought, even more than French literature.
Cole Moshe asks, has the work of Flann O'Brien, who worked with a number of pseudonyms, been an influence at all?
So I had to do a press for it for something, and I thought, well, what writer is it most like? And I think, yeah, I'm really gratified that Blanchot comes up, and then Flann O'Brien, obviously. I think I thought even more than Markson, I thought Flann O'Brien was kind of the obvious analogy with this book. Yeah, Flann O'Brien is another author. The Third Policeman. So maybe my favorite last line of all novels is, I don't even remember what is it. Is it about a bicycle then, or what is whatever the last? I don't know if anybody remembers. The Third Policeman is just one of my all-time favorite books, and he's one of my favorite authors. He definitely, stylistically, influenced, and obviously this is such a kind of patchwork. Like it's almost composed of allusions, and so it's just influenced by everybody, but centrally, Blanchot, Flann O'Brien, Beckett, Markson, those four, I think, centrally, and maybe Borges to a certain extent too. But yeah, I mean, you're identifying everybody who's most driving, and I'm actually okay with being a French author epigone, of being just accepting that I'm just kind of filtering everything I've read into this book, that I'm not anybody. I mean, that's part of it too, that I didn't deserve to have a name on this book because I didn't write most of it. It's mostly just kind of patched together pieces of my life as a person of the book, to appropriate that term. Hopefully that doesn't offend anyone.
CD Rose says, and talking of influences, do you see title as being part of a canon or tradition at all?
I mean, I would think ultimately the book itself, I think it's gonna sound like I'm puffing it up, but I think the only tradition is the Marksonian. I think if it is in the tradition, it's in the tradition of Markson and just Markson. That kind of direct approach to the reader-writer love affair, that direct approach to those two roles that we all assume, most of the people in this room assume, that kind of piece together allusions. I don't know if Markson starts that tradition. I'm sure there are other works. You know who else comes to mind? Another big influence, Carol Maso. I don't know if anybody's read Ava or The Art Lover. Ava especially was a book that really stylistically and structurally hit me in a way that stayed with me. And this book is very much like of trying to kind of fade in and fade out and not staying. I've never liked, I've always needed white space in books and thinner lines. I don't like and yeah, I mean, I love Thomas Bernhard, but I don't like that wall-to-wall text. It feels onerous. But yeah, in that tradition of just kind of piecing stuff together, patchwork. I don't know, Josh, can you think of anyone else who's in that mode?
Um, God, putting me on the spot now. I did not come prepared for that. I think works that come to mind. I mean, this is my bread and butter a bit. I mean, I think a lot of the books I've published, Mihail Sebastian's Fragments from a Found Notebook comes to mind.
Mhm.
I want to say even like Lispector's Agua Viva, works like that. But yeah, I mean, you definitely you fit into the sublunary canon quite well, which is books that I think are, the realm of the sublunary is the realm of imperfect things, and I think it's the imperfections that give like handholds into them for both readers and writers looking to then pull them apart and make their own things out of them, and I think that's what that white space is. For me, I think it's like I picture it like the novels of like Bernhard or Krasznahorkai are both of which I'm a fan of. It's like the sheer drop of El Capitan. Like it's like where do I even begin with this? And somehow those line breaks of fragments and shorter pieces, it is quite literally metaphorically a handhold with which one can climb or start to pry away at.
So I would also say, yeah, and the obvious, Calvino. Somebody said Calvino, and Borges, right? Yeah, I mean, and I'm trying to think. That's a kind of that direct address. I don't know who else does direct address. I think so. So it's much different than If on a Winter's Night, say, in that it's full on direct address. I mean, the book really is as much about reader as author. It is about you in that room, moistening your fingertips and going through that book and your life. And, this is the life you've chosen, a life in books. And to really kind of have you examine that and celebrate it and kind of recognize the pathology of it. But at the same time, kind of, wow, it's kind of a bizarre, unaccountable life that we're all leading in the book.
I think a little bit of Zombra's multiple choice as well, like that. It's kind of taking a completely different tact, but I don't know. It comes to mind strongly.
I have to. So I've read Zombra. I've never read that. I'm gonna have to check that out. I'm gonna write that down.
So we're right up at the hour mark. Did you want to read us out with something, and we'll say adieu to one and all? Thank you. I'll before Name gets to this final reading. Thanks everyone for both reading this work, attending, having fun with it. I assume the speculation among Stephen and Tobias will continue on Twitter later. So everyone pile in, and but I appreciate everyone like going along on this ride, because this is a weird thing to do for a sort of press that's growing and making more of a name and just throwing out an anonymous work. But that's it's fun. It's in the spirit of everything we do, and I'm glad that so many readers have been so receptive to it.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming out. Okay, so I wanted to end the reading with a poem that I thought appropriate by Wallace Stevens called Final Soliloquy of the Interior Paramour. Light the first light of evening, as in a room in which we rest and, for small reason, think the world imagined is the ultimate good. This is, therefore, the intensest rendezvous. It is in that thought that we collect ourselves out of all the indifferences into one thing, within a single thing, a single shawl wrapped tightly round us, since we are poor, a warmth, a light, a power, the miraculous influence. Here, now, we forget each other and ourselves. We feel the obscurity of an order, a whole, a knowledge, that which arranged the rendezvous. Within its vital boundary, in the mind, we say God and the imagination are one. How high that highest candle lights the dark. Out of this same light, out of the central mind, we make a dwelling in the evening air in which being there together is enough. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Name. Thank you, everyone, for attending. This will be up on YouTube later, so feel free to share it with friends, loved ones, people you hate, whoever.
All right, bye-bye.